Hello and welcome to today's edition of Cracking the Cryptic. Now, today we're going to try a classic Sudoku, and this has come to us from Canada. So thank you, John, in Canada, for sending in this. John knows that each week we do try and do a video aimed at solvers with less experience, I guess. Solvers who are used to easy and intermediate Sudoku but want to learn how to approach the hard, the difficult, the diabolical, fiendish, whatever your particular nomenclature is for the more difficult puzzles, and learning how to do the harder puzzles is something that requires tuition, really. I mean, certainly I was lucky enough when I was learning how to do it to have some pretty good teachers, and that's what this channel tries to do. So I'm going to try this puzzle in a minute and see how we get on. Before I do that, just to mention a big thank you to all of the patrons who've, a lot of whom seem to have tried the Patreon puzzle this month. So each month we put extra content on Patreon for those people who sponsor the channel. And it's massively appreciated that you do that. It's $2 a month, and yeah, Mark and I always produce a monthly puzzle, and this month's puzzle has proved very popular. We've had a few correct entries, so well done to those of you who have managed to fathom it out. And anyone who might be in a position to sponsor us on Patreon, as I say, it really is, it would be most welcome. $2 a month gets you the puzzle, $3 a month gets you a video on how to solve the puzzle as well, which reminds me I need to do that because I've not done it yet. Now, if you want to have a go at today's puzzle, just click on the link under the video. That'll take you to our webpage where you should be able to play along. And with that, let's think about how to do this. Now, what I'll do is I'm going to employ what I'll call standard technique. So I'm going to be looking at 3x3 blocks, trying to identify where numbers can go in exactly 2 positions in the box. You can see that's the case down here because of the ones, and I'll make little pencil marks to keep track of that as we go through. This square here I don't need pencil marks for, though. That's got to be a 3. It's these 3s interacting. 2s must be down here somewhere. 4s. Some people say, do you go through the numbers sort of from 1 to 9 in order? Very much I don't do that. Some people do like to, and I think there is some merit to it, because at least it gives you a structured approach, and once you've gone through the numbers from 1 to 9, you can just sort of do that again, and you're not going to be missing out a number that might give you some progress. But I have to say, my mind is far more flighty, I think, and it just doesn't work very well that way. Now these 8s, look, they're quite cool, because that's shows you one of the reasons that this pencil mark method is good. So you can see from the 8s I've highlighted, I'm going to be able to write an 8 into this top right hand box, but in doing that I'm going to take the position of a 7 that I've got notated in there as well. Now the moment I take the position of a pencil mark number, I know the other pencil mark for that number must be the correct one. So that is why this logic of only highlighting where a number can go in 2 positions is so nice. So I also get to write the 7 in there as well. And let's follow through with the pencil marks we're going to get as a result of that. Let's see if we can get any more. Yeah, we can. Oops, we can put some 7s into those squares. 3s, look, these 3s are now having a good impact on this top box. That means that square's got to be a 3. 3's there. One of these squares must be a 3. And incidentally, the moment I put in pencil marks, especially at this stage of the solve, I'm always scanning left. So in placing these pencil marks, I scanned left, and I was looking at the other 3x3 blocks in this chute, if you like, in these 3 rows, and I'm trying to see whether I've got pencil mark 3s in either of them, and if I have, whether the rows match up. Now here I've got nothing at all, so it's completely useless, but just as a good technique, it's definitely something you should get into the practice of doing. Now look, we've got a 4 and a 6 in this column. So we can do these together or we can do them separately, but let's have a look at the effect they have on that box up there. We've not placed a 4 or a 6 in that box at all yet. So we know the 4s must go in those positions and the 6s must go in those positions. Now again, the logic of this is pretty obvious, but I'll just to reiterate it. If I have the same, if I have got two cells which have the same two numbers pencil marked, these must be a pair. I know in the finished solution there must only be a 4 and a 6 in these two squares now. That means that square can only be a 9 to complete the box. Now look, 9 over, oh goodness, I didn't mean to do that, 9 there, 9 there. So let's have a look at the effect on this box. You can see I'm going to be able to write a 9 into this square, and in doing so replace a pencil marked 4. So let's put those in and see if that tells us anything. The 4 is very nice, and in fact the 9 is nice as well. We'll do the 9s first. So these 9s interact now, they force a 9 into this square, pencil mark as a result. Now the 4, well that's going to resolve this 4 and 6. And that's nice, yeah, okay, so now these squares become very nice in terms of this box. Where can we put a 6 in this 3x3 box? Well, it's got to be in one of those two squares. And therefore, where do I put a 6 in this 3x3 box? Well, now it can't be here because of this 6. It can't be here because there's pencil mark 6s there. So there's only one square left. It's got to be here. 5 now resolves that this is a 5. Therefore, that square's got to be a 1. And again, one of the things that I'm particularly bad at is following through. So in terms of these pencil marks. So here I need to make sure as to whether or not I can put in any more pencil marks off the back of these two new numbers. So I'm going to get some 1s there. But quite often I don't do that, or I don't do it diligently enough. This square now must be a 5 to complete the row. We know there's a 4 in one of those squares, but I'm not going to pencil mark it because the 4 would go in one of 3 positions, not just 2 positions. So what would I do now? Well, probably I'd either cycle through the numbers again to see whether all these new digits affected it, but probably what I do next is I pick one of these rows and columns where I've got lots of digits. Let's have a look at this one and see what the gaps have to be. So here you can see we need 2, 5 and 6. Oh, my phone's ringing, 1 second. Right, sorry about that. I had an emergency key situation, so I had to run downstairs. Now, we were having a look, I think, at this column, looking at 2, 5 and 6. So, you see that square can only be a 2 or a 5 because of the 6 here. This one can only be a 5 or a 6. And this one can be anything. Now, yeah, okay. Now, this is really important. This is probably the best tip I can give you for improving your Sudoku. As we scanned down here, I saw two interesting things. Obviously, each one of these squares individually, we couldn't narrow down to a single digit. But the 6 here forces a 6 into one of these two squares, i.e. exactly 2 squares within this column. And the 2 here does the same thing. It forces a 2 into exactly 2 squares in the column. Now, where we manage to lock a digit into exactly 2 positions in a row or a column, especially if you're looking at a hard Sudoku or anything that's beyond intermediate, it is incredibly important to try and see whether you can find that same restriction in another column of the grid. So we'll do it first with the 6s. So we know the 6s are locked into these 2 positions in this column. So I'm going to scan right and left and I'm going to see whether or not in any other column of the grid the 6s are also restricted to these same positions. And I think it's pretty clear here that they are not. The closest is this one, and there's still lots of positions the 6 can go into in this column. So this one, 6s we can disregard. Let's look at the 2s. 2s can go in one of these two squares. So we're going to scan across and see whether or not there's another column where the 2s are restricted in the same way. We can instantly disregard this column and this column because of this 2 here. That's just not going to work. But I'm sure you've all spotted it now. Look, in this column on the right hand side, this 2 here actually is rather beautiful. It has the same effect on column 3 as it does on column 9. And the 2s are restricted to exactly the same 2 rows. So we now know that in these 2 columns, the 2s must appear in row 4 and row 8. There is no other possibility. Now this is, I suppose, the first of the more advanced patterns that occur in more difficult Sudoku. This is called the X-wing, and that's a beautiful pattern. And let's think about what it means. In fact, this is a good example of what it means because of these 2s that we have pencil marked here. So, in order to work out the logic of the X-wing, we need to think about what might happen when we look at the finished solution to the puzzle. So let's imagine we looked at the finished solution to this puzzle where all of the numbers were filled in, and we saw that there was a 2 in this square. Now if there is a 2 in this square here, we know for certain that there must be a 2 in this square. And the reason we know that for certain is because the 2 can only go in exactly 2 positions down this column here. If there is a 2 here, there can't be a 2 there. Obviously there can't be a 2 here because of this 2, so the 2 will have to be down here. So one possibility when we look at the finished solution is that the 2s will be in these 2 yellow squares. Now, if this square in the finished solution is not a 2, we know for certain that this square will have to be a 2 because the 2 could only go into 2 positions in column 3. So if this is not a 2, this will be a 2. And if this is a 2, what happens to column 9? We know for certain this square would have to be a 2 because again the 2s could only go into 2 positions. Now sorry if I'm labouring this, but it's incredibly, you know, I know X-wings for a lot of people they seem completely intractable. They are totally understandable once you get your head around it. So we know that in the finished solution there will either be a 2 here and a 2 here. I'm going to colour that in. Or there will be a 2 in those 2 positions. Now what does this mean? You might say, well, I can understand that's obvious, but what does it mean? Well, the effect it has is a restriction on these rows, because we know in the finished solution, therefore, because of this logic we've just done, there's either a 2 here or a 2 here. And similarly for this row, there's either a 2 here or a 2 here. So we know for sure that these squares could never have a 2 in them. And that, I mean, again, proof by contradiction is one of the easiest things to do here. Let's imagine we looked at the finished solution, there was a 2 here. Oops, 2 here. What would the effect of that be? Well, we know in column 3 there's only 2 positions for a 2, so there would have to be a 2 there. We know in column 9 there's only 2 positions for a 2, so there would have to be a 2 there. Whoops! We'd have a repeated 2 in column 8. So this is why those squares that I highlighted, these ones, cannot contain 2s. Now here it's really obvious what that means, and that's because we'd already been diligent enough to pencil mark some 2s into this 3x3 block. So if this square here can't be a 2, that must be a 2. And what does that mean? Hopefully it means something useful. That gives us some pencil mark 2s there, look. Oh, I see what it means. Yes, look at this column. This column we need 2, 5 and 8 to complete the column. Now we've got a 2 now here and an 8. So that square can only be a 5. And that means there must be a 5 in one of these two squares. These two squares now must be 2 and 8 in some order. We still don't know that, so let's just put that in. And these 5s now mean there must be a 5 in either this square or this square in this 3 by 3 box. Ah, now, yes, I see it. I spotted something else as well. Look, now this 2 is really nice in terms of 7s, because these two 7s, look, they are ruling out 7s from those squares. Now, before we got this 2, if I'd been diligent enough and spotted it, I would have pencil marked 7s into those two squares, but I hadn't spotted that. But I have noticed now that these 7s are important. That means that square's got to be a 7. That means this square's a 7, and the moment I place this square, I get to unwind the pencil mark on the 4s. This 7 here sees that square, so that can't be a 7 anymore. That means this is a 7 up here. Therefore, this is a 7. The 4 here becomes quite nice because it rules out a 4 from those squares. So again, we can pencil mark immediately like that. Now these 4s interact, they force a 4 down here. Oops. These two squares now in this row need to be 6 and 9. There's a 9 here, so that's a 9. This is a 6. You can see this 6 is pointing up here at this square. That can't be a 6 anymore, so that one must be a 6. These two squares are 3 and 4 in some order. There's a 4 here now, and so I'm suspecting that we've broken the back of this. The 4's now, I mean, there's a 4 here. Let's check the 3. This must be a 3. Must be a 3 in one of these two squares. Where can a 9 go in this column? Well, it can't go here because of this 9, and it can't go here because of that 9 there. So that's got to be a 9. That's a 9, therefore. We've got an awful lot of digits in this grid now, so hopefully it won't hold out too much longer. Now, this 1 means there's a 1 in one of those squares. Now, you can see, because of our pencil marks over on this side, I'm now going to be able to write a 1 into this square and a 3 as well. This 3 looks back over here and resolves that that's got to be the 3. These two squares have got to be 5 and 6, I think, and I don't think we've resolved that yet, so let's carry on. Down here we need 6 and 8 into these two squares. Again, not seeing that resolved immediately. I probably should start pencil marking more diligently in case there is a sting in the tail here, but 5 and 6, there we go. So 6's, that's got to be a 6. That resolves, that's a 5. This must be a 6 now. Now, I'm going to be able to write a 6 into this square, and that's important for two reasons. It interrupts the x-wing. So now we know in the finished solution we aren't going to have 2's on this diagonal. Therefore, the 2's must both be like that immediately. Therefore, that's a 5. This square's an 8. This is a 2. This is an 8. Therefore, this is an 8. Unwind the 8 and the 1 at the top. 1 and the 5 here. this square must be a 1 now, look. Unwinds the pencil marks there. This must be an 8. This must be a 5. That should be a 9. And that should be a 5, I think. And if I haven't made a mistake, I want to put a 2 in there. And we'll check, and that's the answer. So that is this week's video on how to improve your Sudoku. I hope it's useful. I know for some of you it will be old news, but we get a lot of new subscribers each week looking to improve their Sudoku, so I do think these videos are worth doing. And it was a beautiful puzzle. So John, thank you very much for sending it in, and we'll be back soon with another edition of Cracking the Cryptic.